My name is Konnor Willison. I am from Utah, here visiting for this conference. I've been in the quality industry about 7 years now. I've worked only out of Utah in quality. I've worked for companies like Bluehost, Overstock, a company called Vivint, which does home automation out there, and I'm currently working at Salesforce in Salt Lake City. I grew up in the Bay Area, California, so if you're from there, awesome. I like the Warriors. It's my favorite sports team. Utah's been great. If you ever get a chance, I would suggest going. It's got a million national parks, really gorgeous. I like to mountain bike and snowboard, and it has kind of the best of both worlds. So I have snow in the winter, and then I have really gorgeous mountains in the summer. So that said, I was kind of hoping my display would be showing up by now. So I'm going to be talking a little bit of background. I was working for a company that was acquired by Salesforce called Demandware. Demandware acquired a company called Tomax, which was based out of Salt Lake, and Demandware is based out of Burlington, Massachusetts. And then Salesforce acquired Demandware, so they acquired me. I work on what they call their commerce cloud, so it's point of sale and e-commerce are kind of the two main areas. And I work primarily right now on their point of sale systems, which is their brick and mortar. You know, you go to swipe a credit card, it deducts an item from the inventory, all that fun stuff. That's kind of what my focus is right now. So Salesforce went through an interesting transition about a year ago now, where they basically said, we are no longer going to have people that we're going to call our quality assurance engineers. We're no longer going to differentiate between developers and quality assurance, and so they have some funny terminology. They call all of their developers members of technical staff or senior members of technical staff and so on. And so they just said everybody's a member of technical staff, which is basically just a developer. So being an acquisition, I was lucky enough to be tasked with, hey Konnor, we would like to make this transition here in Salt Lake, figure out kind of what we need to do to make this transition. And I was running a team of software developers and tests. When I heard this, I pretty much thought, oh, I'm going to start looking for another job because I believe in centralizing quality assurance. There's a ton of benefits to it. I don't see it possible to work where you essentially eliminate this quality assurance position. Thank you. This was just kind of a summary of me. This is my dog. My wife would be really upset if I was posting a picture of my dog and not her or my kids. This you can't really see, but just to give you an idea of Utah, this is the Colorado River. This is a place called Moab. Has anybody ever been to Moab? Yeah? Is anybody from Utah? No? This is just absolutely gorgeous. This is I did the whole Enchilada Trail a week ago now, and this is just coming down at the bottom. It's really gorgeous, like chance of a lifetime. I would strongly recommend going to southern Utah and experiencing it. Yeah, so I already went over a lot of that. I did just want to say thanks for coming. I know you could have been anywhere right now. It is the last class of the day, I believe. So thanks for being here. Thanks for making part of this conference. Great. The key takeaway that I'd like you to take from my presentation is just that the idea of everybody owning quality, it's not just one person, it's not just a gatekeeper, it's the idea of everybody now owns quality, everybody sees quality through the entire development life cycle all the way out into production. It's not handoff. It's not these handoffs anymore. So, too tall for this room, I guess. So I wanted to start out by talking about power looms. So a loom is basically, has anybody ever used a loom before, or know what a loom is? It's a way of making cloth, essentially. And I wanted to kind of talk about the history of the loom and what we can learn from it. So here in the late 1700s, someone named Edmund Cartwright, I believe is his name, developed a power loom. So before this time, it was human operated and human powered to make cloth. And Edmund Cartwright, he developed this loom pictured here, which ran off of steam. It was steam powered. So you could essentially take away the human, reduce costs, all that great stuff. What they found with these power looms, though, is that manufacturers would take a power loom, they would set it all up, turn it on, and then it would produce all the material for them. They'd come back at the end of the day, collect the material, and make a ton of money. What they found, though, is that there was a bunch of defects that were introduced while these power looms were operating. Anywhere from the thread coming disaligned to maybe a bug crawling into this machine and essentially ruining all the cloth. And so what they did is they put a person to cover a power loom or to cover multiple power looms and watch the power loom, and if there was a problem, then they would fix it. So they kind of went backwards, in my mind, to paying people to watch these power looms. Yeah, they did save some money because one person could watch multiple power looms, but you started getting into this process of one person monitoring it. If that person had to take a break, you would start losing money because the power looms wouldn't be operating. So there was still the human cost there. And then, I don't remember the date on this. Someone named Toyota, I forget his last name, Seichi. I believe he was out of Japan. He developed a lot of really cool mechanisms for the power loom. One was I believe it was called an auto threader or something like that, where it would detect when the thread broke and it would automatically feed in a new thread, and so the power loom could keep operating. He did a lot of other really cool checks, but essentially he eliminated the need for this human to monitor the power loom. He said, what is this person doing? How can we fix it and make it more efficient? And so he created this really ingenious device for his time. And so kind of the point that I wanted to make here is that how is QA being used in your organization today? There's typically 3 different ways that I see QA being used. Is it more of a waterfall or the term scrumafall, I believe is the term, where people say waterfall is dead, but when you look at it, it's actually mini waterfalls inside each sprint. So are you really just kind of looking at quality at the end of your cycle? Do you have a quality person assigned to each team? Are you taking kind of more of a proactive approach and trying to embed quality as far upstream as possible? With that, so this is kind of how some of the organizations are typically set up. This is how my organization was set up. We had a dev manager, and he was over a few teams, and the QA were embedded in each team. And if the team was lucky, they had a software developer in test. That's what the SDET is. Some other companies will have a QA manager that will be over those QA, and then the QA will be embedded in the team. And then also, some organizations will allocate QA as needed to each team. And then I'm sure a lot of you are in QA, so I'm sure a lot of you have been on the team where you had to kind of stretch your resources, and it's pretty miserable. So, and then typically test ownership. Has anybody read How Google Tests Software? It's a brilliant book. Jason Arden, he did Test AI talk yesterday. He's a really smart guy. He co-authored that book, so hopefully you're able to check out his talk. But this is, I believe it's in that book. If not, it's definitely on Google's blog. This is kind of how they broke up testing and the importance of it. So a lot of your effort should be in this unit test section here, and I just kind of broke up to how typically who owns what. And yeah, there's sometimes some kind of like sometimes developers own a lot of some of this area, and sometimes sets will own more down. So I actually make this a little more loosely defined. I just started calling these bottom ones small tests, all these ones medium tests, large tests, and then these are enormous tests. Because I don't really like to, everybody's got a different definition of, a lot of people have different definitions of unit tests, and the further you go up, a lot of people have even more definitions, so I just break it down by small, medium, and large. So what's the problem with kind of how the organizations are currently set up? If you've ever had to hire a software developer in test or a QA engineer, from my experience, I've found it's very hard to find people with that mindset and then also that want to remain in that field, especially with automators. A lot of automators see that as a stepping stone to being a developer, making more money. So I've been pretty lucky where I've found a few automators that really just want to stay in the QA track. But typically it's really hard, I've found, to find really good quality engineers. So hiring good QA, I think, takes a long time. It's hard to scale. When you talk about the dev to QA ratio, a lot of companies will look at that and try to scale them at the same ratio. And so you start coming into this idea of, if you want to hire a developer, you have to then hire a QA engineer to support the developer, which doesn't make a lot of sense. Career mobility, I've left positions because I wasn't able to move up as a QA engineer. It was either you're a QA engineer or you might be able to jump into management, which was a pretty hard jump to make. And so the tracks for QA was a little bit off compared to what developers had. It's also kind of this unique situation where quality ownership was either a single point of failure. It was hard to blame one person. As a quality engineer, you're usually the person to blame. So those are some of the problems I started realizing from these old organizations. And so, like I was talking about earlier, I was tasked with this idea of what Salesforce was calling hybrid engineering. And there's a lot of other terms, but this is the term that we came up with. So like I was saying, I was tasked with this idea of, hey, how do we transition from our current organization to eliminate the quality assurance position and make it so everybody is now accountable for quality? And so, like I said, I thought about quitting. While I was thinking about quitting, I did some research, and doing my research, I started realizing that, hey, you know what, this philosophy, this idea of it's not just a QA person that should be responsible for quality, it's now the entire organization should be responsible for it. And then just some things, this isn't one thing for each organization. I mean, each organization is different. There's some pros and cons. Some things work, some things don't. Even when we started this transition, each team was different. And one thing that I found really helped was doing this transition. I still have retrospectives. We moved it to monthly now, but we have retrospectives with key individuals to talk about how they think the transition is going. Okay, so some of the benefits that that I found from this is that QA now has a dedicated track that they can take because they're now considered developers, and developers typically have a better career mobility than QA does. It simplifies accountability. Like I said, everybody now owns quality, not just one person. One thing with Salesforce is a huge company. We have around 26,000 employees, and each development group was typically doing their own thing. It was really hard to make it so each team was measuring their quality the same way. Each team was addressing quality concerns the same way. So this way we were able to say, hey, everybody owns quality. We're going to drive it throughout the organization, and we're going to make a couple of criteria for you as well. And it was a much easier way to address the problem. It's a lot easier to hire. Now I can just hire developers, so it made it a lot easier. Like I said, everybody owns quality, and then what we've seen is that developers are now inclined to, who said it? I think it was the creator of Perl. I forget his name, but he said he only hires lazy developers because they'll find ways to fix a problem where they don't have to do it anymore. So that's kind of one thing that I've started to realize with developers and with that mindset is that they are inherently lazy and they want to find the easiest solution to the problem. And so one of the easiest solution is, hey, I don't want to manually test this product. How can I automate it? How can I make it so it's built more into our continuous integration, so that way I don't have to spend my time on it. So what are some of the major companies switching? Atlassian, Yahoo, Salesforce, Google to a degree does it. And that's Google's actually been a big influence for me and their model and how I've decided to kind of approach this. So this is just an idea of how I approach this transition period of switching to hybrid engineering. How do I started thinking about how do I eliminate the role. You can't just tell everybody, hey, you're QA. We had 3 manual QA at the time and 3 automators at the time. And so we couldn't just tell them, both those groups, that they're now feature development, that they're now into feature development. And so we had to create a transition plan. And so our current organization was set up like this, like I showed you earlier. And so what we decided to do is to transition to hybrid. We basically just stripped the QA and the automators, the stats from each team, and we put a QA that was more of a consultant role over each of the teams, and they would help consult the developers on how they tested the product, how they ensured quality of the product. And so they would no longer be hands-on. This was more of a, like I said, a consultant role. So some of the transition roles. So developers, development, they're really highly technical people, and so we'd still utilize those skills, but we'd also utilize those skills to help train QA and to transition to be more development-minded. And so some of the things that we encourage them to do is help QA learn their unit test framework, and then from there help them learn their integration tests, and then from there throw some feature development at them is kind of the plan. So the quality assurance, like I said, they'll work with multiple teams. They're more of a consultant. They're not hands-on anymore. They're just enabling their developers to be more quality mindset. And yeah, like I said, the first stepping stone is to get them trained on test automation. So if you look back at this slide, I'm kind of removing 2 people right here. So what we realized is if this is from Lisa Crispin's Agile Testing, I believe is the name of the book. These are like the Agile Quadrants, and this is kind of different sections of accountability for testing. And so what we determined is that quadrants 1 and 2 are going to be up to the responsibility of the development team. But then we also have these other sections over here where it's like I'm not too sure if the development team should be owning this, or if it even makes sense for development teams to own this. Specifically, we also added end-to-end testing right here, because it doesn't really make sense for a development team to own the end-to-end tests. And so what we did was we decided to come up with a QA team of people that just wanted to be automators, work on test infrastructure, help facilitate quality, people that still wanted to go down the QA track. So we created a dedicated team. They worked on the tooling. I don't believe this has this. We actually modified this to kind of better fit our needs. But they worked on tooling, end-to-end tests, and then they also work on performance in terms of like longevity testing, benchmarking, and things like that. And the team that I created, they're actually creating tools to help enable integration testing, because end-to-end testing and integration testing, they work pretty similar, and so it just made sense to have our team create the tooling for the integration tests. And based off of those from the tooling that they made, it then was easy to facilitate end-to-end tests. All right, so what can you do today? I realize that it's a pretty big organization change, but I wanted to kind of talk about what you as QA can do today. You don't really necessarily need to be in management, and hopefully, I'm sure a lot of you are already doing this today, but kind of clarify a better definition of done. So some of the criteria that we set forth for each team was, we said, hey, you need to meet X percentage code coverage at least for your product to be deployed to production. We also, for definition of ready, we implemented test plans needed to be included on each story. And Google has a really good document on efficient and fast test planning, where it should only take you about 30 minutes to do so, and it's not a maintenance nightmare as well. So we implemented this the beginning of the year in January, and we're kind of thinking about how can we measure if it's successful or if it was even worth doing. And so one of the things that we did was just measuring defects found in production. Are they going up? Are they going down? With this new methodology and encouraging the fact that everybody owns quality, we would expect that our defect rate would go down, because now more people are aware and conscious to the idea of making a quality and stable product. So here's an example of our group and the amount of confirmed bugs found in production. So I put a trend line on here so you can see we're trending down. We had this kind of blip right here that we actually investigated quite a bit, and we couldn't find a reason why we had this huge spike of defects right here. But I think this graph is pretty awesome, because it shows that when we implemented this, we were able to start trending down. And we've seen a huge, well, not a huge decrease, but you can see that we're seeing a decrease in confirmed defects in production. So it's showing me that what we're doing is right, and it's helping us create a more quality product. All right, so what's the worst that can happen? What I was reading the article about Yahoo, and one of the comments was, if you take away this safety net of quality, which obviously if you're walking on a tightrope, you'd want a safety net, because if you fall, you obviously would like to land on the net. One of the comments was saying, you're basically taking away the safety net. That doesn't make any sense. Why would you do that? But I really like the thought of, yeah, you're taking away the safety net, but you're encouraging developers to start thinking more along the lines of, hey, I'm walking on a rope. What if instead I built a bridge, something more stable, something that would make it so I don't really have to worry about falling? So that's what I think that's what I think our approach is really encouraging. It's encouraging this mindset and this change in development that they're not tossing things over the wall anymore. And then kind of something that I like to speculate on. I haven't really been able to find out the root cause of the Volkswagen scandal that happened. I believe it was last year. Just a little history. So in 2009, Volkswagen wanted a way to reduce the nitrous oxide emissions from their diesel engines. And so they tasked a lot of teams on it. And in 2009, they released this new engine. And the engine, it had a computer that basically detected when it was plugged in to be tested for emissions. And based off of that, it would then reduce the amount of emissions that it was putting out. And so whenever it was plugged in, it looked great. Hey, this works great. But when it was actually running on the road, it produced a lot more emissions, which made it more fuel efficient. So I like to speculate, and I don't know if this is true or not, but I like to speculate that this is kind of what happens when you put development in charge of a product and don't have any quality checks. Because somebody programmed this computer to determine when it was plugged in or not. And I really think that is probably the worst thing that could happen if you take away quality from a team. So it's more about enabling developers to really think about the quality of their product from start to finish. And does anybody know how much this costs Volkswagen so far? I just looked it up. In September, it was $30 billion. That's cost them in just legal fees and fines from like the U.S. and Europe, other countries in Europe. So that's all I had. So the slides are available on my website. Also, if you wanted to follow me on Twitter, my team in Salesforce is also hiring if you're interested in relocating to Utah. It's a beautiful place. You can go mountain biking, snowboarding, all that fun stuff. Does anybody have any questions? Yeah?
So the first question that comes to mind when it's this change you put in for the development group. Have you had any backlash from that, where developers will say, oh, I'm not going to do that, so I'm going to put up a job?
You know, surprisingly, nobody's quit because of it. I was actually pretty shocked over that. One of the hardest things is not getting quality trained on development. It's actually getting development trained on quality. So that's been our primary focus. And one of kind of the gotchas that we didn't really think about was we thought it was going to be hardest to teach somebody how to be a developer, but it's actually a lot harder to get an entire group of developers to really start thinking about building quality products and building tests that will actually ensure the quality of the product. So no, we haven't had any backlash. Yeah.
Did you experience any like kind of swirl in developers and their test implementation, where one developer would do it one way, another developer would do another way, and then they would actually come time to collaborate or share. They're just not good ideas together, but they are good separate. Stuff like that.
So like was one team doing different things for testing compared to another team? Is that kind of what you're asking? So for unit tests, we don't really care. Development can pretty much do what they want. For integration tests, they have to use our framework. So for unit tests, it's whatever you want to do. We trust you. We use things. We're starting to use things on certain teams like SonarQube to really ensure that they're writing quality unit tests. But for when you start getting into the medium range tests, yeah, there is a framework, a common framework that they have to use.
Yeah, I see the organization I work for is there's a lot of issues with relinquishing control to a test framework. They want to see everything that's going on in the tests. They'll do it themselves, but they want to look and break in and find out any problems.
No, for the most part, development was pretty happy that we were taking that away from them, surprisingly. So we haven't really found that. And one thing that really helped was there was a ton of duplication of code at that level of testing. So we were able to centralize it, make it so that we weren't wasting time anymore. Yeah.
You said the letter becomes more accurate and implement more accuracy.
So we, as Salesforce, we're pretty lucky because there's a ton of money behind Salesforce, and so Salesforce is a huge company where they have classes that they put on internally. So we were able to utilize these classes in learning feature development. We mostly use Java, and so they have an advanced Java training class that we're able to utilize. But if I realize that a lot of people don't have that resource available, but I mean, there's a ton of websites out there that offer free training to be a developer and to start learning how to code. Yeah. So those are defects that are reported by the customer. So yeah, it hasn't. Yep. Yeah, in the back.
Was there any impact on the velocity of the Scrum team?
Yeah, great question. I forgot to mention that. So with each change, you always kind of expect there to be an impact on the velocity of the team. We did see a slight dip in velocity on certain teams, but some teams were already positioned a little bit better to absorb the quality process within the team. But to answer your question, there was a slight dip on some teams, but we saw the trend continue to go up, which is what velocity should be doing.
One more question.
Yeah.
Did you see that who was maintaining quality automation framework and the enhancements that needed to be done? Was the development team now here?
So my team owns our test framework for integration tests, and then when you start getting down to unit tests, that's up to the development team. So I have a Scrum team, and we work on requests that come in. It goes into our backlog, kind of the standard stuff.
They work outside the Scrum process, the sprint process?
I work on sprints. My team works on sprints. We work on two-week sprints. Yeah, did you have a question?
Yeah, I was curious about the test coverage triangle that you had shown, and you mentioned the emphasis on the small tests
Yeah.
at the bottom. But I was curious, like, what your methods are for measuring that, and how, and you mentioned sonar, I think, was another question, but I was curious about that.
Yeah, there's a lot of code coverage tools that you can use. So from my viewpoint, you want most of your effort to be on those small tests. That's where you're going to get the most bang for your buck. You're going to fail fast, all that good stuff. So we've specifically used SonarQube to measure that. It's got a lot of really great features. I would really encourage you to check it out. There are more open source software as well available for that. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. I guess, how about, like, as far as quality of the tests?
So, yeah, I was actually just talking to somebody at lunch, and I'm not too familiar with SonarQube, but SonarQube does a really good job of actually looking at the quality of the tests and telling you if it's hitting all of the conditionals in a statement and things like that. If you don't have that resource, then I would really encourage audits of the tests, which is a pain. Yeah.
You mentioned the centralized team and then the embedded. How do you determine who's on the centralized one? Is it seniority or personal preference? And secondly, people rotate.
So we don't have any QA embedded on teams anymore. It's just centralized.
Okay.
So the centralized team is just focused on end-to-end tests and tooling for the integration tests. And then I technically have two teams. I have another team focused more on performance testing.
Cool.
Yeah.
So do you still have the QA consultant, or are they have
that was our transition period,
Okay.
and we kind of estimated that our QA can start doing feature development by the end of a year, and then we expect them to be fully integrated within the team after 2 years is kind of the time frame that we're planning.
Okay.
We realized that as of now, 10 months into it, it's been the manual QA, because it's pretty obvious looking back, but the manual QA has taken a lot more time and resources to getting them up to speed, whereas the software developers and tests, they've been a lot easier to integrate, and they're actually already writing feature code.
So the centralized team you have that are focused on end-to-end tests and performance,
Mm-hmm.
are you planning on keeping those, or?
Yeah, we're planning on keeping them because,
Okay.
yeah, the aspect of end-to-end tests didn't make sense to have those be the responsibility of each development
Or
team.
kind of like what things are you use Loom or something is end-to-end required?
Yeah, essentially. So we worked with a product to come up with key business use cases. And so they wrote end-to-end tests for that. And then also as new features come up, they assess and figure out if we want to write end-to-end tests for that as well. Yeah.
So they're all, do you have an email?
We do at the team level, yeah.
Okay.
Because we've got a lot of little gotchas like our pin pad. It's been really hard to automate pin pad and stuff like that.
Okay. So it sounds like you didn't necessarily get rid of the QA team entirely, you just changed the function of it.
A little bit, but we also, a lot of the QA went to be more of a development route.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about the centralized team, right, that are focused on end-to-end testing. Are they doing development or
Just end-to-end tests and the test infrastructure.
Okay, so they're QA then. I mean, you don't have to call them that. I'm just.
Yeah, I still call them QA,
Okay,
but my organization does not.
understood.
Yeah.
Okay. It seems like it's maybe just a little sneaky way of just keeping a little bit.
It was kind of like a sneaky way of doing it.
Not in a bad way.
Yeah, not in a bad way. It just didn't, like, when I was looking at it, it didn't make sense. Like, how was I gonna make sure end-to-end test coverage was still available? And it was really hard to put it together from each development team.
How many of those little teams do you have, like the development teams?
In Salt Lake, we have, I want to say around 10 off the top of my head.
Okay.
There's about 50 of us.
And they all work on very discrete areas. Are they distinct, or do they have to work together ever to deliver something?
Occasionally they do work together, but for the most part they are pretty siloed.
Okay.
Any other questions? Please complete the evaluation from the staff, and thank you very much.
Thank you.